Hello and welcome to episode number 300. This is, thank you. This is the Project Management Podcast at pm-podcast.com, and I'm Cornelius Fichtner. Yes, episode 300. Who would have thought back in 2005 when I bought myself a cheapo Logitech desk microphone to record the first episode that this little hobby of mine would take all of us to this point here? Well, I certainly had no such expectations. And for this 300th episode, I decided to turn the tables. This is our first Ask Me Anything episode. So I reached out to 10 project managers who were guests previously here on the show, and I asked them to send me their questions. The questions could either be personal for me or about project management. And because I contacted 10 project managers and I asked each of them to send me one question, I did, of course, end up with 15 questions. Talk about scope creep here. And so, without further ado, here are Margaret Maloney, Jack Ferraro, Lindsay Scott, Frank Saladis, Kevin Riley, Suzanne Matson, Mark Perry, Elizabeth Herron, Craig Wilson, and Todd Williams. And of course, my answers to their questions.
Hi Cornelius, it's Margaret Maloney, Community Leader over at pmstudent.com. This is my question for you. Are you a project manager who uses project management in their personal lives, or is it just at the office? And the reason I ask that is I seem to find that there are people who are, excellent project managers, and they use project management at work, for work, and when they get home, they don't want to have anything to do with it. Then there are others, also excellent project managers, who use project management at work, and they also use it a little bit in their home lives. Maybe it shows up when they plan a trip, or the way in which they execute their errands around town, or in other things. And so I'm just curious, which one are you? Are you the project manager who only wants to use project management during working hours? Or are you the project manager who uses project management at work and in your personal life? Thank you, and congratulations on your 300th episode.
No, actually, I don't. In fact, I feel that my personal life is often quite chaotic. Now, compare that to Josh Nankerville. I know that Josh uses agile project management approaches at home to assign chores and tasks to his family. I believe, at least a year or a couple of years back, they had a Kanban board up on their fridge where you could see, who was doing what, the work in progress or the chores in progress, and you could see where things were, and they had a workflow. And no, in my case, it is chaotic. I have post-it notes that are stuck all over the place. I have to-do lists, and when I have to write a to-do list, I actually walk over to my recycle box where I keep all the old papers. I take out an old envelope and I write my to-do lists on the back of the envelopes. Literally, when I'm out and about and I remember something that I can't forget this, I will send a text message or an email to myself to remind myself. And of course, that then means I often have 100 emails or so in my inbox. And there is constant procrastination and things just don't get done. Even though my wife says, these post-it notes actually work quite well for you because you get them done. You pick one up, you scratch it off, you throw it away, and you get things done in that way. So no, I don't use project management in my life. It's my personal life. It's rather chaotic. But even though it is chaotic, I have learned to prioritize. Even though I have all these post-its and notes all over the place of things I have to do, I've learned to prioritize and really do the things I need to do first. And I've also learned to be rather ruthless, because if I realize this post-it note has been stuck here on my monitor for 2 weeks and I'm taking no action on it, I'm going to throw this away. Because if the item that is on the post-it note is really important and it needs to be taken care of at some point in the future, it will come back. So I do weed out these things. I do delete them. I make them go away. I delete them from my life so that I'm unburdened again. And if it was important, it will come back in the future. It will inevitably come back to me. And our next question comes from Jack Ferraro from myprojectadvisor.com.
So my question to you, Cornelius, is over the years you've been successful in providing great high-quality products to the project management community. I think my question to you would be, over the years, how have you seen your customers change? What was the nature of your customers when you started, and what is the nature and what are the interests and what is the type of customers that you have now?
Well, from the very beginning of when I started, 100% of my customers have been online. I have online PMP training, I have online PMI ACP training, I offer online PDUs, and of course, I offer this free online podcast. And when we look at the motto of the Olympics is faster, higher, stronger. And when we translate that to my customer, I think my customer can be defined as faster, cheaper, and mobile. Of course, in the last few years, everything has gone to mobile. All my podcasts are really designed to be consumed on the go, as well as all the other PMP and other training products that we have. They are 100% focused on mobile. In the beginning, this was mostly iOS, so that was for Apple iPods and iPhones. But in the meantime, Android has really picked a great market share there. So everything is now available. It doesn't matter whether you're on Apple or on Android. Of course, everybody wants their things much, much cheaper. And this is actually a quandary for me, because many of my products are massively less expensive than what the competition offers. You can get my PMP exam training for less than $200. And I get angry emails from people when they miss a discount for $10. I want that discount for your exam preparation, or I'm going to leave a bad review. My God, you've by taking my product, you've just saved hundreds of dollars as compared to the competition, yet you're angry that you missed a discount. So that to me is a little bit of a quandary. Should I even give a discount? But, faster, cheaper, mobile, that's just the way things go. And faster, here I mean that more and more people around the world have fast internet access. In the very beginning, when I did the podcast here, I always had a very high bit rate. So this is very close to CD quality, what you hear. And in the beginning, I had complaints. These files are way too large. It takes forever to download them. You have to make them the quality lower and so that the files get smaller and it doesn't take this long to download. And in the meantime, I have a lot less complaints about this, and people don't complain that the sound is so great because nobody has the download difficulties anymore. So over time, my customer has really gone faster, cheaper, and mobile.
Hello Cornelius, happy birthday, happy 300th episode. It's great to see the PR podcast still going strong. This is Lindsay calling from London in the UK. I'm from Aris People, so we're interested in program and project management, recruitment and careers. So I've got some questions. I've got a question for you to help celebrate your podcast birthday. You've obviously met a lot of people along the way, Cornelius. I mean, I'm really intrigued to know how you do that. So, so how do you find the people the great people that you've had for the podcast? But also as a kind of secondary question to that, you must be a great networker to be able to get some of these people. So I'd love to hear some of your tips for networking.
Because the Project Management Podcast has been on air for almost 10 years, people come to me these days. I get at least 1 to 2 emails every month from potential guests who suggest a topic and would like to talk about something. Very often, book authors come to me from project management related books. Or then again, I see an article and I find the article of interest, so I contact the author and get the author to come and speak about that. I attend a lot of seminars and they often have multiple tracks of speakers, and so I get to know all these great speakers in person. Then I invite them to come on. Or I'm actually also sometimes a bit sneaky. I go online and I go to conventions and conferences or professional development days, and I look at the speaker lineup, and if I find something interesting, I invite those speakers. A good example is the Conscious Software Development Summit that I recently participated in. There are about 3 or 4 speakers that I'd like to get in touch with, and I would like to bring on the program. And then it's really just a question of asking people. If you remember, well, those of you who have been with the program for a while, back in episode 100, I had a special guest on, Alan Parsons from the Alan Parsons Project. He's a musician. And I only brought him on, Alan Parsons Project, the Project Management Podcast, so there was a connection. I never expected him to say yes, but I wrote to him and instantly within an hour I got a response back. Yes, absolutely, I'll do this. So you really just have to go out there and ask people, and they will say yes. Also, I found that people who have something to say, they want to be interviewed. They're more than happy to come on the program and talk about their topic because they're passionate about it. And when it comes to networking tips, frankly, I don't do anything different than what they tell you in all the networking seminars. I always have my business cards with me. I write to people, I thank people, and I just I try to be open, and when I meet somebody new, learn about them first and see how I can help them out. All right, that was question 1. What's your next question?
Since PM Podcast started, there's been loads more project management information available on the web. And I remember when PM Podcast was in its early days, and there really wasn't that much else going on in terms of the project management information on the web. So I'd love to know how you're keeping PM Podcasts still relevant today, and how you're keeping people tuned in.
One of the ways I can keep it relevant is by book authors coming to me and wanting to be interviewed. Of course, they have a book to sell, so they are always happy to come on the program and discuss the topic. And there I try to really dig in and figure out now what's the essence of this book and bring this to the listeners. I also read PMI's Pulse of the Profession, which is always a good read because it talks about the bleeding edge really of project management and what will be the upcoming things and topics. And then again, there is also personal interest. I want to learn and grow something when I do an interview, so I find new topics, I find angles for myself, I find things that interest me, and I bring those topics and those speakers onto the program. Good example is the Scaled Agile Framework, SAFe. As from the date of this recording here, 4 weeks ago, I didn't know that SAFe existed. I, of course, knew about Agile, but SAFe, I had never heard of SAFe before. And now I'm in the middle of discussing with a potential guest to come on the program and talk about the Scaled Agile Framework, so that I learn something new and so that you all learn something new as well. All right, question number 3, here we go.
Cornelius, over the years you must have seen lots of great things happening in project management, but I just want to turn the tables a little bit and ask you about what still disappoints you about the project management industry today, and ideally, what would you like to see changing for the better?
I think here we can talk about the turf war between agile project management methodologies and waterfall-based methodologies. This is less of a disappointment for me personally. It's more sort of a pet peeve because it's almost like a religious war. What is better? Is Agile better, or is Waterfall better? And whenever I read these ongoing flame wars, you have to call them that, on message boards online, I feel like I have just been teleported into a scene of the movie The Life of Brian by Monty Python, where Brian, the hero, is running away from a bunch of followers, and in doing so, he loses one of his shoes, and the followers come upon that shoe and pick it up, and it's like, oh, this is a sign, follow the holy shoe. But somebody else brought a gourd, and she says, oh, no, here, he touched this gourd, follow the holy gourd. No, follow the holy shoe, follow the holy gourd. I mean, from my perspective, this kind of near religious war that's going on between these methodologies is somewhat a little bit pointless, because from my perspective, the right methodology depends on your project. And of course, then you can argue which one is the right methodology for this particular project. But just generally saying, oh no, Agile is better than Waterfall, or Waterfall is better than Agile, that's really not the way to go from my perspective. That's also why I came up with the light bulb joke. Go something like this: how many project managers do you need to screw in a light bulb? The answer is you need 2. You need one project manager to screw the light bulb in, and you need a second project manager to tell the first one that this would have been so much easier if only he had used Agile methodologies. And next up is Frank Saladis. We recorded his question at the PMI Global Congress in Phoenix.
Cornelius, one of the things that I want you to know is that I am always recommending people to look at your videos and your podcasts, okay? I always say, oh, you have to go and you have to listen to Cornelius. He's an interesting person. He's got a very pleasant voice, and and he's humorous, and he's got all these great things to talk about. So always go there, okay? And then my question to you is, you do have this uniqueness about you. What is it that makes you so unique, that draws people to keep coming back to you, to listen to your podcasts and your interviews? You have some quality that is hard to define, and I would kind of like to know, what is it about Cornelius that people seem to just, they come to you and they like to listen to you and they feel good about after they listen to your sessions?
Well, out of the many questions that I got, I think this is probably the toughest one. I thought about this for a long time. I really don't have a good answer for this. This all started about 10 years ago when I first met Mark Perry from the PMO podcast. And he told me, you are likable. People like to listen to you. And to this day, I don't really have a know why. You see, I'm struggling for words here. Yes, it is very hard to define what it is. I don't think actually that it is my voice. I think that I have an average voice. I don't have a male, warm, deep timbre that I can really play with. It's not necessarily a voice for radio. And, so my thinking is maybe it is because I like it when others succeed, when I can help them succeed. So my motto has always been to give first. And so whenever a new podcast comes onto the market, I feature them, I bring them on, I interview people, I give them a platform where they can be themselves. I try and help others to achieve their goal. And I genuinely, when I meet somebody, I genuinely ask them, how can I help you? How can I be of service to you without any ulterior motives that are behind that question? I have a positive attitude, and I try that this positive attitude comes across in my podcasts. I try to make sure that the guests on my podcasts are always shown in the best light. I do ask challenging questions, but this is not an argument, or I try to be mean and ask questions to derail a politician, because I want everybody to learn from the experience. And I always feel that things will work out for the best. This has been sort of my life's motto. Everything will always work out for me. And so I believe in it, and I work towards that. So this is kind of my answer to it all. Like I said, it's very hard to define. My wife has a completely different answer to this. She says, well, it's because you have a skip in your step and you have a crooked smile. But of course, that doesn't come across in the podcast at all.
Good afternoon, Cornelius, and this is Kevin Riley, and I wanted to congratulate you on episode 300 of the Project Management Podcast. As you know, I've been a guest on your podcast 3 or 4 times. I really enjoy it. And I wanted to ask you a question about basically the future of project management in the next couple of years. And my question is, what do you consider to be the most important emerging trend that will have the biggest impact on the evolution of project management in the next 5 years? So what's kind of the thing that's going to impact most of us as project managers ourselves?
Hey, Kevin, this is almost a philosophical question. And to answer this question, we are going to need some music. Hit it. The music that you currently hear is by David Byrne. It comes from his album The Knee Plays, and it's called In the Future. David Byrne, you may know him best for his work with the Talking Heads. He's the voice of the Talking Heads. And in this song, David paints a rather confusing picture of the future. He says there will be government. No, there won't be any government. People will be overweight. And then he also says there will be starving people everywhere. So why am I playing this song and talking to you about David Byrne? Well, I feel that in terms of project management and future trends, we're looking at pretty much the same situation. There is going to be an abundance of things happening in project management, and predicting which of these is going to be, impacting the most of us is very difficult. For example, those of you out there who know about Agile might also have heard of SAFe, the Scalable Agile Framework, I believe it is called. Frankly, I hadn't heard of it until about 3 weeks ago, so SAFe had no impact on me whatsoever. And as part of getting the questions for this 300th episode here, I spoke to Lindsay from the UK, and she was of the opinion that, here in the UK, Agile is not so hot. We're not so sure about this. And then also, there's the new PMBOK guide coming up in a couple of years. So is that maybe going to be the trend that's going to, be of so much importance to all of us? So I thought, well, let's go back into the past and see what happened in the past. And so I looked at a few predictions for the current year. What did people last year say? What would be the big trends in this year? And, to just give you 3 of them, one was benchmarking. It's going to be big in project management. Then servant leadership is going to be big. And also the portfolio management certification from PMI was going to be big in 2014 this year. And I had to say, no, all 3 of these completely wrong. And then it suddenly hit me, wait a minute, servant leadership. I just recently did an interview with Jack Ferraro, and servant leadership, that's kind of his thing. So probably in his world, yes, servant leadership is big, it's important, it is impactful. And so my answer to your question really is, it depends. It depends on where you are, in which part of the world, in which industry you are, what type of project management you do, and all of this together will bring the trend that will be most impactful for you. And your trend, the one that impacts you, is not going to be my trend. So I'm going to take the easy way out here, and I am going to, pretty much repeat the final words that David Byrne is also using in his song here. And he says, in the future, there will be so much going on, no one will be able to keep track of it.
In the future, there will be so much going on that no one will be able to keep track of it.
Hello Cornelius, this is Suzanne Matson. First, I would like to congratulate you for actually having recorded 300 interviews for the PM podcast. That is just phenomenal and really, really valuable for the whole community. Your podcast is the go-to podcast for project managers. I also value the opportunity to ask you a question. So, my question is, what is the biggest unforeseen event you had to deal with during one of these 300 interviews? How did you deal with it? And what did you learn from it?
Yes, there are two events that I would call quite unforeseen. The first one was when my microphones got stolen. Yes, that was about 3, maybe 4 years into doing the project management podcast. We had a fire here in our area. We got evacuated and we put everything into our car and we drove to our friend's house about 15 miles from here and took everything inside, parked the cars outside. The next morning, I come out of the house, the car window was smashed in, and somebody had stolen my computer bag out of the car. I had completely forgotten to take that one in, but there was no computer in the bag. The computer bag contained all my microphones. So I would love to see the faces of those two or one person who smashed the car window and then took out the computer bag and was running away, hoping, I've just scored a computer. Opened it up and there were these two microphones. So what do you do with those? Good thing came from it though, because once these microphones were stolen, I had to sort of regroup and think, okay, what next? And I decided not to buy microphones anymore. Instead, I bought professional headsets. So the way I'm recording the podcast right now and all the interviews that you hear from the road is we have a couple of headsets. They're relatively expensive headsets with very good microphones so that the sound quality is still there. Much easier to use from my perspective. And of course, much more portable. You don't need microphone stands and things like that. So that was the first thing, the stolen microphones. That actually led to a good thing for me from my perspective. Second, very unforeseen, people started asking me, how can we pay you for the Project Management Podcast? That was a head scratcher. Thinking, wait a minute, I'm doing this for free. Okay, get this? I don't want your money. I'm putting these interviews out for free, and you want to pay me for this? And the overwhelming answer is yes, we want to somehow help pay for your efforts. And that was when I came up with the idea of having a free podcast primarily, but also offer a premium subscription. And this is really the model that we have had ever since then. The podcast is mostly free, but there is a premium subscription available. There is usually a free interview, then a premium interview, then a free interview, then a premium interview. And as you may have noticed in the past 2 months or so, there were only free interviews. So all the interviews that I recorded at the PMI Global Congress were 100% free. And just so you know, know, the travel expense that I had to the Congress, my flight, my hotel, it was about $1,600, the actual fee that I had to pay to be allowed there, that was all paid through the premium podcast. So everybody who is listening to the free podcast right now, please stand up, a little standing ovation here together, and let's applaud all those people who are subscribed to the premium podcast, who make it possible for everybody who's listening to the free podcast that you can get all those great interviews for free. And a personal thank you from me to everybody who's subscribed to the premium podcast, because at least once a year I take my wife out and we have a lovely pizza together with the fees that you're paying for the premium podcast. So thank you very much for dinner.
Hello Cornelius, it's Suzanne Madsen again. I have just one more question for you, if I may. I would like to ask you what your biggest aha moment has been as a project manager in your career with project management. That could be, a new technique you discovered, a new approach you discovered, anything where one day you thought, oh wow, I really get this. Like it lifted you to a new level.
My biggest aha moment came when I realized that project management actually exists. Yes, I started out, like so many of us, as an accidental project manager. I was a software developer, a junior software developer at a paper mill in Switzerland, and there my boss came to me and said, oh, go over to Mr. I don't even remember his name. Let's call him Mr. Smith. Go over to Mr. Smith. He wants something small. And it took me 18 months to deliver that something small. And based on that, I started to realize that, while I do enjoy software development, I actually enjoy working with people on these problems a lot more than I enjoy the coding of the software in the background. So I went abroad for a year after that. I came back and I found myself a job with a consulting company as an organizational planner. At the time, project management wasn't really a thing back in Switzerland, so I went into organizational planning, which is very, very closely related to project management. I also got my degree in organizational planning back then. It's not quite a bachelor's degree, it's more than an associate's degree, it's somewhere in between there. So I have an organizational planning degree in Switzerland. And project management was part of this, and it actually became more and more what I did. As I was working for the supermarket chain Coop in Switzerland, we were implementing project management methodologies for our department and division, and that's when I first saw the PMBOK Guide. I think it must have been the PMBOK Guide second edition, and I thought to myself, wow, this is enormously structured, and for what we need to do here, it is absolute overkill, because we really needed only a very small methodology that could be applied pretty much by everybody. I wish Agile had been around at the time then, because that would have been a really good thing to use at the time. From the supermarket chain, I moved on to a internet startup company developing websites, and I still didn't know that project management as a discipline, the way I know it today, exists, and it was more a grassroots effect there, a grassroots effort there. All of us project managers, and we called ourselves project managers at the time, got together and we developed our internal methodology. And that is when things started to click. When I looked at requirement specifications, documents, and project plans, and the light suddenly went up in my head. And I'm like, oh, wow, you've been doing this without actually knowing that it exists. You may not have done it right. You've looked at the PMBOK Guide. You've seen all these things. You've just been the project management hero without actually knowing that what you do exists. It is a discipline. And I think this aha moment happened to so many of us that many of you are probably right now smiling, going, yeah, that's exactly what happened to me as well. Next up, Mark Perry from the PMO Podcast.
Cornelius, congratulations on the 300th episode of the Project Management Podcast. It just seems like yesterday when you first started, and I really am thrilled that you've given me the opportunity to play host and ask you a question. After all the podcasts that you've done, it's great to turn the tables. And here's my question for you. Many project managers think about starting their own companies, but the prospect of leaving a secure, well-paying job for an uncertain entrepreneurial roll-of-the-dice endeavor usually, not always, but usually is a showstopper. As someone who has done it, and quite successfully at that, what advice would you give to a project manager that would like to start their own company?
Let's briefly start with my own story first here. I decided to become independent and form my own company in about February or March of 2008. And on April 1st, I had my last day of work for the man. And on April 2nd, I started my independent life. Had I waited only for about 2 to 3 months, I probably would never have done this, because that was when the economy here in the USA tanked and had a real bad crash. And I was actually a bit scared when that happened, because I saw, oh my God, is this actually going to work out? But as we all know, it has worked out for me. I also have to say that my business is focused on products. We sell training products, so I can't speak for services here. And in the 10 years that I have had my business, there is one thing that I have learned and that I would do differently now. And every time somebody asks me, I give them the same answer. If you want to start your own product-based business, either online or virtual or in real life, start with the smallest possible product. You don't have to go all out and invest a ton of money and time in your first product. Instead, identify the problem that you are trying to solve for your customer. The biggest need that your customer has, and then determine or develop a solution for that. And once you have that solution, throw that solution out, because you have probably just defined the Mercedes-Benz, the Rolls-Royce of answering the problem for your customer. Now, that's your future product. That's your big product that you want to work towards. Now, think in small steps. Figure out, okay, if I want to work my way up to this big product, what would I have to develop first? What's a small product that's going to take me 3 to 4 weeks maximum, possibly even only a week or 2 weeks of work, so that I have an initial product that I can sell to my potential customer and help them overcome their problem? Here's what I did, and I did this wrong. My very first product was a full-featured PMP exam preparation course, over 35 hours long in duration. It took me over a year to develop it. And in that year, of course, I had no income. There was nothing coming in, instead of just doing something else and something smaller. At the end of this, when I had my first customers, I asked them, well, what other products would you have liked? And they said, you know what, the formulas for the PMP exam, that was really difficult. And within only 3 weeks, I had developed a formula study guide. So it took me 3 weeks to develop a smaller product that I could have started selling out there. So my number one recommendation for you is, if you have an idea for your own business and you want to start out in your own business, then think small first. What does your customer really want to know? What will help your customer? The smallest possible item. That helps. your customer. One thing that I always enjoy doing is I enjoy helping people. So whenever somebody comes to me and says, hey, I have this great idea with a product, with something that I'd like to do, I always give them half an hour to an hour of my time over Skype, and we chat, and I tell them how I did it and how I became successful, or at least as successful as I am right now. So if you have an idea and you'd like to talk to me, then please feel free to contact me. I'm always open, and I'm always happy to chat with people and give them some of my time in order to help them get started. And the one thing you can do to get started on your side is go to internetbusinessmastery.com. That's internetbusinessmastery.com, and look for episode 68. I think you can actually go to internetbusinessmastery.com/68 or /068, and that should take you to an interview that I did on that program, where I talked to them about the complete story of how I built my business, how I started my business, and they built my business and developed the products that I have.
Hello, Cornelius. It's Elizabeth Harrin here from A Girl's Guide to Project Management. Here's my question. What's the most surprising question that a project management student has ever asked you? Looking forward to hearing your answer. Thanks.
Elizabeth, well, after 10 years of teaching the PMP exam and also the PMI ACP exam, I think I've gone through all the surprising questions, and I've answered most of those. But what still surprises me today is when students ask me questions that they should pretty much know that, well, I don't have an answer for them. For example, I was recently asked, should I take the PMP exam or should I take the PMI ACP exam? Or another favorite question that students have is, am I ready to take this exam? Or then I get an email from somebody that says, I work in position X of a company. Do I qualify to take the PMI or the PMI ACP exam? And, with very little background information. So it's very difficult for me to answer these questions, and if I don't have more background, it's almost impossible. And even questions like, should I take the PMP or the ACP? How should I know? That really is up to you. You have to make that decision. This has to come from within you. You have to decide whether the PMP or the ACP is right for you. But I've actually found a solution, what I can do about these surprising questions. And the solution is I write an article about it. So I don't take this and shake my head and go, oh, what a silly question you have asked me. I'm looking at this as almost like a challenge, saying, well, you're probably not the only one who's wondering, should I take the PMP? Should I take the ACP? Or am I ready for the exam? Or do I even qualify for the exam? There must be more people out there. So this isn't a silly question. This is a genuine concern that people have. So I take this as an opportunity to sit down and think this through and wonder, how should you decide whether to take this or the other exam? Or how can you verify whether you qualify or whether you're ready to take a certain exam? And I write an article about this. I go through various ideas and suggestions of what you could do and how you could do it. And by the end of an hour or so of thinking and writing, I have a pretty good article that I can then in the future guide people to. And whenever I get another student writing to me saying, hey, I don't really know, do I qualify for this exam? Can I even take this exam? Am I ready for the exam? I can just point them to the article and say, I don't really know and I don't really have the answer for you, but here is an article that you can go and read and think about it yourself. All right, Elizabeth, here's your other question.
What can a project manager do if their project sponsor is never available for meetings or support? Thank you.
Well, Elizabeth, frankly, I think that really depends. And come to think of it, I think I should really write an article about this so I can send people to it. Let's start at the very beginning. if your sponsor doesn't have time for you to meet and discuss, there's probably a reason for it. It could simply be disinterest, or the fact that there are scheduling issues, or the fact that your sponsor is overbooked and that's why he or she doesn't have time for it. There's just only so many hours in the day. In the end, we have to agree, though, that you are the project manager of the project, and therefore you are responsible for project success, and you have to find a way to bring the project to success. It also means you actually have more authority than you think you do. Maybe you don't even need the sponsor in certain situations to make decisions. So, maybe you don't even need to get together with the sponsor, and the fact that the sponsor doesn't have time, you could just sit down and say, well, you know what, sponsor isn't here, I'm going to make the decision. I'm the project manager, I have the authority, I'm going to take the authority. And if the sponsor doesn't like it, then later on, you have an opportunity to discuss this. But let's start with the positive side. Let's think about, what can we do? So let's talk about scheduling. If your sponsor doesn't have time, maybe you are trying too much. Maybe you're trying to get an hour of your sponsor's time, and the sponsor doesn't have time for that. Why don't you say, hey, could we, and this is where we take a lesson from Agile, could we do a daily quick call, just 10 minutes, and I promise you only 10 minutes, not a single minute more, or maybe just 5 minutes, where I can ask you a single question or 2 questions. So a daily quick check-in with your sponsor. If that doesn't work, well, let's go for the weekly 1 hour. And in both cases, you're going to have to be very mindful and respectful of the sponsor's time. And make sure that if you promise 30 minutes, you're done. Maybe even after 25 minutes, to show the sponsor, I have a clear agenda here. We're going to be done after 25 minutes. Yes, and one thing that I used to do in situations like this, when the sponsor just wasn't available, is I made the decision, like I mentioned earlier, but then after I made the decision, I wrote a quick email to the sponsor. Subject, decision made, whatever the decision is. And I quickly explained to the sponsor what the decision was, how I made the decision, and, why my argument is like that. Is that okay? One thing that I've also learned in these emails have to be really short, and I have a tendency to write too much. I also seem to have a tendency to talk too much here. And so the goal is, write the email, save it, don't send it, go to lunch, come back, and then cut 80% of your text. Yes, 80% of your text. Usually what you want to say can be said in 20% what you originally wrote. In this way, you get a really concise email out to your sponsor in which you tell them, hey, we've had this problem. I have taken the authority to make a decision here. This is the decision I have taken. Are you okay with that? Thank you. And that's it. So again, you are the project manager. You are responsible to ensure that you make this project a success. So do anything and everything you can to drive it to success. Get together with the sponsor on a regular basis, or if that's not possible, make the decisions for the sponsor and then submit your decisions as a, hey, after the fact, I've done this kind of email. And now we are moving on to Craig Wilson and his question.
Cornelius, congratulations on your 300th episode. So my question is this. Since you initiated this program, Agile has come from a new kid on the block status to mainstream acceptance. How have you seen that impact project managers in terms of careers and positions within teams and companies?
Officially, there really isn't a project manager role anywhere in Agile. There is the Scrum Master and there is the product owner that some people say project managers can grow into. And when you listen to the recent interviews that I've done at the PMI Global Congress with Jack Ferraro and Dave Cornelius, then each of them really has their unique view and position on how to answer this topic. And I think that is throughout. If you ask 10 people this question, you pretty much get 10 answers. So from my perspective, being a project manager is a personal career choice. I love the profession. I love the work we do. And frankly, I love it both in a waterfall environment and in an agile environment. I've done both, so I'm enjoying the work no matter what the underlying methodology is that we use. However, if you yourself prefer more the command and control style of project management, where really you are the master of disaster here for this project, then find yourself a company that uses mostly waterfall approaches where you are really in charge of your project. If, however, you are more about servant leadership and agility and teamwork and really working together as a self-organizing team, then, well, you've already found the answer here. Find a company that uses agile approaches and grow into the agile world.
Cornelius, Todd Williams here with eCameron Incorporated. Congratulations on your 300th episode, and thank you very much for having me as a guest on a couple of those shows. I think that you have a very unique perspective on PMI, the PMP, and education in general for project managers. You provide tools that help people gain their PMP, but then you also run podcasts of the hot topics, what people really want to hear and really want to learn about, and you drive both of those. And I don't think those are congruous with one another. So you have a unique perspective of what the PMP trains for, tests on, what all that information is, and then what people want to hear. Can you tell us the top 3 things that are a disconnect between those two? What people want to hear, but is not part of the PMP. I'd love to hear that. And again, congratulations on your 300th episode.
This is a tough one, Todd, and I had to think about that quite a bit. In fact, I asked one of my PMP exam students who recently passed, hey, what do you see here as a disconnect? And he too scratched his head and it's like, can't really come up with something. What I realized as I was thinking about the answer here is this is probably a very personal thing. If you work in a specific industry where a specific method is used over and over and over again, and then you come to the PMP exam and you realize, now wait a minute, this method here that we're using in our industry is extremely important. Why don't they talk about it in the PMBOK guide? Why isn't it tested on the exam? Then sure, you will see a disconnect here. From my personal experience, therefore, I think that earned value techniques, earned value management, a bit overrated in regards to the PMP exam, a bit overstated. They're wanting too much. There may be too many questions on the exam about this particular method, simply because, frankly, I've never had to use it. I didn't even know it existed before I took the PMP exam, and I've never had to use it on one of my active projects either. Well, lucky me, probably many of you will say, because you're using this day after day after day. So it's good that it's tested on the PMP exam. That's what I meant. It's really a personal thing. One item that I found where I think there is no disconnect, on the other hand, is project selection. Project selection is touched upon in the PMBOK guide and is also tested on the PMP exam, but I think it's tested in relation to what we project managers actually do. We come in and onto the scene usually once the selection is complete, once it's done, it's over, we know what we're going to do. The project manager needs to know a little bit about how project selection works, but project selection is done before the project, outside of the project. You don't really need to be the project selection specialist. And that was our first Ask Me Anything episode. Thank you everyone for all the encouragement in the past that you have given me that has brought you and me here to episode number 300. And that's it. Thank you very much for listening. As always, you can find us on the web at pm-podcast.com. Please send your emails to info@pm-podcast.com. And for the 300th time, when you write, please do tell me where in the world you are writing from. And finally, we have this. How many PMP certified project managers does it take to screw in a light bulb? It takes 2. It takes 1 to screw it in, and a second one to ask, we're gonna get PDUs for this, right? Until next time.